Welcome, whoever just joined. This is Federica, part of the Docsity team, and we're just about to start with our masterclass on inventory system. We are connected with Zaragoza Logistics Center, and let me just introduce our speakers for today. We have the Professor Spyridon. Lekkakos is a PhD professor, and we have Marta Romero. She's the Director of International Masters. So we will be starting with our masterclass first, and then moving on into the presentation of the academic offering. And finally, we will be answering live to all the questions that you might have. It's a pleasure for me now to leave the floor to the professor, and I look forward to receiving all of your questions.
Thank you very much, Federica. I'm Spyridon Lekkakos, a professor in Zaragoza Logistics Center since 2016, when I finished my PhD in the same institution. And I welcome you to this inventory systems masterclass. Usually, you know, inventory systems is not considered a very attractive course. So one of the goals of our sessions today is to motivate your interest in the topic. What I have observed the last 6 years that I teach this topic is that students in the beginning are a little bit indifferent on the topic, but as we progress and they learn the different challenges, drivers, and so on, they appreciate, actually they are fascinated, and most of our students eventually find jobs that relate to somehow inventory management, demand planners, supply planners, and so on. So the first goal is to motivate the interest. You will see that it's fascinating. I will try to convince you that it's challenging, but rewarding as well. If you can master this topic, you will find the chances to have a good job placement increase. And the second, let's say, goal of today is to provide an outline of how we approach the topic in Zaragoza Logistics Center. So the best way to motivate is to refer a little bit to the financials. Why is management of inventory important? It is important because if you look in the balance sheet of retail firms, you will see that the inventory can be 70% of the current assets or 45% of the total assets. And actually what we see here is the inventory, you know, as let's say the contribution of inventory in the total assets, which somehow corresponds to some funds that are tied up, you know, to finance this inventory. So it is very important for the managers. Equally important in manufacturing firms, the inventory can be 10% of the total assets and 30% of the current assets. So now immediately you see that inventory management gets a lot of the attention in organizations, no matter if we are talking about retailers, which is something obvious, or manufacturers, which is also very important. So some other numbers show that by the end of 2018, the average monthly investment in inventory for US firms was equally to 1.9 trillion, representing $1.35 investment for every dollar of sales made. This is very important number, meaning that, you know, in order to be able to sell our goods, we need to have sufficient inventory in our network so that we can support our sales. These numbers just demonstrate why it is important and why a lot of managerial attention falls on inventory management. Then inventory management is also challenging. And why is it challenging? It is because we are not talking about supply chains anymore, but we are talking about global networks. Now we have global networks of companies competing with each other, which means that actually our products can reach customers throughout the world. And in order to reach these markets, we need a very, let's say, complicated and elaborate distribution network. And at the same time, also, we need manufacturing facilities that are all over the place. You see here, in this example, that we can have in Africa, in Europe, United States, and Japan. And in order to, let's say, provide the necessary raw material to this manufacturing network, we need also suppliers that can be found all over the globe. So inventory in this network that we see is actually all the flows of goods that go from the right-hand side to the left-hand side to the right-hand side, meaning the suppliers, there is a flow of raw materials to the manufacturing sites, then there is some flow of finished goods to the distribution network, and there is a flow of goods to the customer side. So you see already, you know, that what we call physical flows in any supply network is actually inventory changing hands or changing form. And also, you know, we have, as the inventory is moving from one direction to the other, then we have also financial flows. The customer will pay for the goods, and then these actually payments will also be used to pay the suppliers for the raw materials that we get. The problem, though, is that in order to coordinate all this network and optimize inventory, you need a lot of information flow. And the information flow actually goes in both directions. And usually we're not so good, into changing data and information in the most appropriate way so that inventory in the system is optimized. On top of that, we need to recognize that we have multiple decision makers. We have multiple layers, of course, of entities and decisions that are made by different decision makers. And we have varying objectives, which is, a nice way to use a nice word to use to describe, let's say, conflicting objectives, because quite often what is to the best of the interest of the customer or of the distribution center, let's say, is not so beneficial, let's say, to the marketing. And if you have individual decision makers who are independent, then you have a lot of conflicts in the KPIs and the interests of the different stakeholders. Then on top of that, a great challenge that you are all aware of is, disruptions that happen in the marketplace. You are all aware, of course, of COVID. There are trade wars between the US and China, and now you have more participants, in similar trade wars. And also you have, actual wars taking place currently. And all these things, have impacts to key raw materials. You can see here the oil prices, reaching the all-time high since 2008. All these are disruptions that more or less have an impact, in the flows, in the cost that we pay actually to transport the goods, in the production cost, and actually in all our inventory decisions, both in the physical domain, information, and financial domain. So a result, for example, in order to see what are the implications of all this complexity and the disruptions is what we call the bullwhip effect. I don't know if you have noticed, but recently, there is a mismatch between supply and demand. There is much, much higher demand than supply. And actually, in the United States, it's the first time in the history of the automotive industry that the cost of a used car is higher than the cost of a new car, exactly because the lead time for the new car to arrive to the hands, let's say, of the customer is too long. So this somehow increased the demand for used cars. So this is what we call the bullwhip effect. And in our case, one of the reasons of the bullwhip effect is this perception of short supply, which makes the customers, like the entities that are downstream the supply chain, to inflate their orders in anticipation of supply shortage. Definitely, the bullwhip effect is something that exists for a long time. And we don't claim that by taking an inventory course, you can resolve the bullwhip effect, but definitely you are in a better position to anticipate and deal with the bullwhip and the implication of the bullwhip if you have some formal education that addresses, let's say, the topic of inventory management. Then if you think that it's only external reasons that can cause, let's say, inventory problems, then most likely you are mistaken, because quite often is the policies from within the company that can cause a lot of conflict and a lot of inventory problems. And if I start like clockwise, you will see, for example, in the sourcing function, the main goal, the main KPI is the cost of procurement. In this case, most likely the sourcing would favor supplies that come from low-cost sources or low-cost countries. But if you obtain, let's say, the raw material from far away, where the low-cost countries are located, then most likely you will generate a lot of inventory in your pipeline, because the lead time for these raw materials to arrive into your production sites would be quite long. Similarly, if you go to the manufacturing, the main performance indicator for manufacturing might be the capacity utilization. We have very expensive assets in place, and we will expect the manufacturing function to utilize these assets to the maximum. But if you utilize the assets to the maximum, then you generate a lot of inventory in the system. Here you see, for example, that a policy of having 20 days of feedstock on hand, a little bit arbitrary, But this one, the second one, really can have a huge impact on inventory. When manufacturing has as a target to operate at full capacity, then that means that they will generate inventory in the system, even if this inventory is not needed by anybody. Yeah. Then you go into the distribution. The main KPI here is to minimize, let's say, the transportation cost, in which case you might favor, let's say, some consolidation of shipments, and you have also some rules, for example, to have replenishments, shipments taking place on Monday and Thursday. But this might be suboptimal when you consider the inventory problem for the entire company end to end. And then when you go to the marketing, of course, marketing, would favor to have a full assortment of sizes and colors and give very high service level, if possible, to all the customers and so on. So you see here, many of these objectives are conflicting if you consider the global optimization, even for the same firm. And then you have in the middle, usually finance, putting a lot of pressure to reduce inventory, for example, by 10% in order to achieve high inventory turns and report some good results to the shareholders. But nobody, is in a position to manage inventory end to end and connect the dots. And this is somehow realized and recognized by Gartner. Gartner is an organization, is a research, let's say, company, consulting company, you can call it, specializing in supply chain management. Which provides a lot of insights, through the connection with the industry. They collect a lot of data and provide a lot of insights and knowledge to the organizations. So one of the things they have identified with regard to the corporations, let's say, capability to manage inventory in an intelligent way is that companies usually invest a lot for visibility and analytics. Now, you have dashboards, you have Power BI, you get a lot of data and you present this data in real time. Many people working actually in this domain, but actually what is needed in order to improve inventory performance is knowledge. And knowledge here is broken a little bit. It can be found in different parts of the organization, but also, due to, I would say, poor governance, you don't have an entity being responsible for optimizing inventory end to end. This is a major issue that I have also identified through a lot of interaction that I have with the companies in the industry, that you don't have, let's say, the talent to understand what are the challenges, drivers, and so on, the major, let's say, levers for inventory management. Usually, this talent does not exist or is broken, meaning you find some knowledge in sales, you find some knowledge in the supply chain, in production, but nowhere consolidated. And this is, the governance issue. Then, to streamline the amount of inventory, I remind you that we are in the global network world, which means that we might have planners sitting in the US or in somewhere in Europe, in Germany, and they have to plan operations for a global site. So with this in mind, we need to recognize that inventory somehow is managed by the help of some systems. Those systems can be SAP, the planning module of SAP, which is called Advanced Planning Optimization, or it can be, the new comers that some companies that have more advanced planning tools like Kinaxis, O9, OPM, and so on. I don't know if you are familiar, but these are, the big names now that they claim that they have their planning, let's say, approach is state of the art. So no matter what system you are using, at the end of the day, inventory is what will help the supply to match with the demand. It's necessary, absolutely, when we are talking about the retailing. In retailing, you cannot wait to get your goods most of the times. So you need to have some inventory. If we are talking about brick and mortar shops, then the inventory should sit there somehow. But even when we are talking about Amazon, then again, you need inventory because quite often Amazon promises next day delivery and so on. So inventory is a necessary, let's say, guy, let's call it like this, between the supply and the demand process in order to match supply and demand. And as I've said, in global environments, usually this inventory is managed by systems that you have in place. which are quite often black box to the planners, because the system at some point was acquired by the company. They paid a lot of money to have SAP APO, and then some consultant came and they used some assumptions, a modeling approach. The system has optimization capabilities and formulas, and this is how they calculate, let's say, the inventory that you need to have in your system by taking into consideration some master data. By master data, we mean parameters that are fed from the demand part and the supply part. For example, if we are talking about the demand part, the major parameters is to have some forecasting, some idea of how your demand looks like in terms of volume, volatility, seasonality, and so on. And also, what is your forecasting performance will have an impact on what the system will tell you that you need to have available as inventory in the different stocking locations. So you need to feed the system with the customer locations or stocking locations. You need to feed the system with what is the lead time that you offer to the customer, what is the desired service level that you offer to the customer, and of course, you know, all the costs that have to do relate, let's say, with the order fulfillment. On the supply side, things are more complicated, particularly if we are talking about manufacturing firms. So over there, we have some network configuration being configured, let's say, in the system. We know our capacities. We know what are the production stages. We know what is the throughput, nominal and demonstrated. What are the cycle times? We know, or we can configure in the system what is the batch size that we are using, meaning every time that we start a production run for a particular product, how many units do we produce, or how much volume do we produce if we are talking about process manufacturing. Then we need to specify what type of replenishment method are we following. By replenishment method, we mean make to order, make to stock, and so on. We need somehow to capture the volatility in the supply, because disruptions happen also in the supply. Every time we start our production, we will not perform exactly the same. You might have quality losses, you might have breakdowns, and so on. This is what captures, let's say, the supply volatility. Then we need to have the lead time for raw material. Of course, then all the supply, raw material, and production costs throughout the network. So once we feed the system with all these parameters, and usually many more, the system operates in a black box mode and give you some recommendation about how much inventory you need to build in the system. Quite often, this recommendation is not very accurate. And this is why we have the planners bypassing most of the times the output of this system. So while the companies are paying a lot of money to install these black boxes, the black boxes in practice are not used. Exactly because you get numbers that do not match with the reality. And the human brain will perform better capturing the parameters that are important and improving, let's say, the decision that is recommended by the system. So one of the key goals of the course that I teach, inventory course that I teach in Zaragoza, is to build some confidence, let's say, to the students to understand how the black box work and be able to challenge the assumptions, modeling approach, and everything, and actually being able to configure in the right way so that this black box start returning, let's say, credible results. This is an ongoing issue and a serious problem for most of the companies that I collaborate with. Then if we see what happens in practice, things are very funny. And you might laugh with what you see here, but actually I have shown this to several sessions that I have with different levels of executives from organizations, from real companies, and I haven't heard not even once, you know, an objection. They completely agree with what we see. So here, what do we see? We have a lady, most likely this lady is from marketing, a marketing analyst, stating that, you know, we need to cut the price for a particular model by 10%. Then the first guy to react is the financial guy, the chief financial officer. And he would say, oh, 10% on 20% gross margin product, then that means that we need to double the volume to make the same profit. Definitely, this would affect the reports, the reporting profitability for the company. And now we will start seeing the finger pointing. So the first question goes to excuse me, it goes to the supply chain guy who is asked, why do we have excess inventory? I thought we were operating lean. After the sales guy first says that we have a lot of inventory and we need to drop the price if we want to get rid of. So now the person responsible is the supply chain guy who has built a lot of inventory in the system. And then the supply chain guy says, we just build according to the forecast. And why you have not taken the forecast if the product is not selling? Very reasonable thing. And now you have again the sales guy saying that the forecast actually is adjusted or meets exactly what has been considered in the annual budget. At the end of the day, to make a long story short, the companies, they set targets. Those comes from the executive, the board of directors. They are communicated throughout the organization, and then the sales team, they better meet those targets. So what they do, the wishful, let's say, thinking, which is that eventually we're going to meet these targets, they make it a forecast. But this is not how things should work. And the summary is that the companies, they design their planning process as if the forecast truly represents the reality, although they know that their forecast accuracy actually is not so high. In most of the companies, you cannot have forecast accuracy greater than 80%. So this is, what happens in practice on the demand side. What happens then? The result, let's say, of this mismanagement of inventory is what H&M has realized in the hard way. I think all of you are aware of this. H&M is a fast fashion retailer, actually one of the top 3 fast fashion retailers, and they had a problem of 4.3 billion in unsold clothes in 2018. What does it mean, 4.3 billion in unsold clothes? This means that they need to reduce their profitability, the bottom line, by 4.3 billion. And at the same time, this would have implications in the stock price. They show the closing price for the stock was the lowest since 2005. And they experienced this situation in 2018. So companies, they will pay a hard price, if they don't manage their inventory carefully. So one of the reasons that we have, this inventory problem is the lead time gap. By the lead time gap, if we want to explain the lead time gap, we have this problem exactly because the time it takes to procure the raw materials, manufacture the finished goods, and deliver the goods is usually longer. What we call here logistics lead time is longer than what the time that the customer is willing to wait for getting the goods. Obviously, this refers to a B2B, B2B context, manufacturing company, because in the retail, usually the order fulfillment is much shorter. They are not willing to wait not even for 1 day to get their goods delivered. So in the manufacturing context, let's say by explaining this particular example, you see that in order to meet customer expectations, you need to already have procured the raw material and have already started manufacturing and have some forms of inventory, in different stages, what we call work in progress, if we want to meet this delivery time expectation of the customer. So this situation requires, carrying inventory in the system. And actually, the longer the lead time gap, then the longer the horizon for which we need to forecast. And usually forecasting for long horizons is not so successful. We are in a better position to forecast what will happen tomorrow rather than what would happen 6 months from now. So definitely this creates the longer the lead time gap, the stronger, let's say, the problem, the more serious the problem when it comes to forecasting performance and eventually inventory performance. So another issue why inventory management is a little bit complicated is that usually in organizations, we have a tendency to see inventory in isolation. Although in the reality, inventory directly relates to capacity and time. What does it mean, time? If we come here and we train the customer that they need to wait longer, for example, for receiving the goods, then the lead time gap will close. Actually, if we manage to convince the customer that they need to wait for that long, then you don't need to take any inventory risk. So now immediately you see that time and inventory, they have some type of relationship. Yes, and similarly with the capacity. So the other guy that interacts with both time and inventory is the capacity. Here, for example, if we have higher capacity in the system, in the manufacturing, we might be able to shorten a lot the lead time. So what you see here is this long, it can be half or 1/3. And this is only possible if we have a lot of capacity invested in the system. So immediately you see that inventory is not a guy that operates on its own, but interacts a lot with the capacity and the lead time. And this is, a way to better visualize that. So this is what we call the supply chain fulcrum, which relates, let's say, to the point at time at which we commit to source, produce, or ship the product in its final form. So that means that if it is here, that means that we need to plan and produce everything because it's far away from when the demand is going to be realized. So that means that we need to base our inventory decision, our production decision on some type of forecast. And eventually, this would require more capacity investment and more inventory investment. But if we commit, to start our production very close to the demand, meaning that the customer is willing to wait longer, then the capacity investment and inventory investment is much lower. So I don't know how informative is this graph, but this is what I try to explain, let's say, through this logistics lead time and lead time gap, like the impact of manufacturing and the impact of time, of lead time that we offer to the customer. So once we are clear, let's say, that capacity, lead time, inventory relate to each other and so on, the next step is to make some network type of decisions. Here we see the design parameters and policies that are associated with inventory management. And we can see here in the customer domain, one aspect that we need to be aware and will affect, let's say, our inventory performance is what is our customer value proposition. By value proposition, we mean what is the assortment with how many goods, we will serve specific markets, what is the service level that we offer, and what is our cost strategy, how do we compete, our pricing strategy, let's say. And of course, all these together, they make something like the service level that we offer to the customers. Then, once we have specified these things that usually the marketing and sales colleagues are responsible for specifying these aspects of our network design, then we need to select, let's say, our stocking locations. We can have in the same country 20 warehouses to be very close to the end market, or we can have one central warehouse. This would make a difference. And then what is our regional warehouses? How much centralization is an important, let's say, aspect that eventually will affect our inventory performance. And then as we move into the production, in addition to our capacity decision, we need to discuss, first of all, how the shipments and inventory policies are coordinated. Are we make to order, make to stock, and so on? And also, where do we source the raw material from? I don't have this here because there was no space. But you see that this is the end-to-end view. We cannot manage inventory in a silo. We cannot manage the inventory in the regional warehouse if we don't know what are the policies here, 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 and here. Yes? So it's very, very important to understand that inventory management at the end of the day involves some network design decisions, and these should be considered, on the individual sites. I must say that the decisions that are made on this level will affect more or less 80% of the total inventory cost that we will have in the life cycle of the products or in the operations of the company in general. These decisions will have a huge contribution. Once we've made these decisions, then the application of inventory policies is just, fine-tuning. Those will be responsible for 20% of the cost. And here we see in a manufacturing context, what do we mean, let's say, inventory policies? I remind you that the network choices have been made. Already, we have decided how, let's say, what are the contributors for 80% of the cost. Here, we are talking about, minor things with the goal to balance actual supply and demand on the operational level. Yeah, here is, I would say, tactical or strategic level, because we are talking network. Here we are talking operational level. So 20% of the cost only. So in this case, we can see inventory like tanks. We can represent like this type of tanks. So we have the supply through the purchases. We have some flow of raw material in this raw material tank. And then this valve will open whenever we have some release for some production orders, in which case the raw material will go down this inventory and it will start feeding what we call work in progress or intermediates. Then we have another valve that will open, and this will open when we ship our goods to the stocking locations. And this is why we have the finished goods. And once we have the finished goods in the stocking locations, then the valve will open only as the customer will start pulling the goods, meaning that the sales will actually happen. Okay? And this is how it works. And you see again what I mentioned before, that you cannot deal with the inventory decision in a silo. This is what I mean. Usually, we better have somehow of some type of collaboration on how these valves will open and close. But at the end of the day, our decisions of how the valves will open and close is what we call an inventory policy. And actually, inventory policy, to describe what does it mean, an inventory policy is very simple. Is an answer to the question when to stock produce and how much to stock produce. Meaning, when I'm gonna initiate this flow of raw materials, and how much when I'm gonna stop as this level of the tank goes up. Very simple questions. But for these simple questions, you have more than 10,000 papers, academic papers, actually addressing inventory problems, because things can become really, really complicated. The questions are very simple, seemingly simple as we say, but when it comes into answering and covering all the potential contexts, meaning operating environments and realities, then things can become very complicated. So no matter though what type of policy, let's say, we will have in place, no matter how we select to answer those two questions, at the end of the day, the movement of inventory follows this pattern. And we have what we call cycle inventory here and what we call safety inventory here. So the cycle inventory is the inventory that we are holding in order to meet demand during the replenishment period, because we replenish inventory in batches, and we have a container arriving in a particular site, then the sales take place until the next container arrives. So this is what we call the cycle, and this gave the name to the cycle inventory. And the other is called the safety inventory, which is the inventory that we are holding exactly because several things can go wrong. First of all, we are not so good into forecasting the demand. Second, you know that supply disruptions happen all the time. And here you see the drivers. The main drivers for the cycle inventory is economies of scale. What we consider when we make these batching decisions is the economies of scale and the very famous EOQ model, economic order quantity. When we consider the safety stock decisions, then we take into consideration the demand variability or forecast inaccuracy. More or less, those two are the same. We have the lead time, we have the target service level, and so on. Yeah, and there is some other type of stock, what we call pipeline stock. I don't have it in this figure because this relates mostly to network choices. If I source from China and I sell to the US, definitely in any point in time, there will be something like 5, 6, 7, depending on the type of product and the volume of the product, containers that they will be somewhere in the world on their way, to our market. Then a major problem that I see in the companies is that, as I've said, the system that they are using has been configured by some outside consultant, and then they don't really understand what is the inventory logic in the system, in the black box. And when we don't understand the inventory logic of the black box, then we face the risk that this logic of the black box does not agree with our operating environment or is not aligned with our production logic. And then as a result, what we have quite often in organization is continuous firefighting. And even when we have some success stories, meaning a mandate came from the executive board to reduce inventory, and we finally managed to reduce inventory. First, this will not be sustainable. Second, it will not. It might have implications on the service level and so on. We might have, it might backfire somehow, because it's easy to reduce inventory. We stop producing. But then what we're going to do with the customers who arrive and ask for this inventory. So the best approach to resolve this issue is to really understand, the inventory, the theory of inventory management, and understand what type of inventory model is more suitable for a particular operating environment, and then being in a position, to identify the right parameters and configure the model in the black box appropriately, so that eventually you will have a desired performance that can be anticipated in advance, and not being the result of continuous firefighting. And here I just show, what does it mean, a logic, for example, of inventory logic. Here we have an example of what we call continuous review, because in a continuous review model, we just monitor inventory at any point in time. So whenever we reach something that is called a reorder point, then we place an order, and then this order will arrive after some lead time, and then it will bring our inventory, it will increase inventory, accordingly. Yes, so this is how it works, a continuous review. Another approach could be to follow a periodic review. Now, the inventory is replenished in fixed periods in time. In this case, you can see that this is a review period. We observe what is our inventory and we bring it up to that level. Then the inventory will arrive after the lead time. Then we observe again in the second review period what is our inventory, and we bring it up again to some specified value and so on. This is a periodic review favors environments when you need some fixed scheduling, let's say. In several organizations, the changeover times in the production facilities are very high and very costly. You spend, if you want to switch from product A to product B, you need to shut down, let's say, your line for 5 or 6 days, in which case you would like to have some stability, and then a periodic review method would perform better than a continuous review method. This is just, to demonstrate that the type of inventory or replenishment policy that we are following needs to be adjusted with the operational realities of the company. And of course, there are several levers for reducing inventory, which actually involve managerial choices on network design, capacity, policies, but also involve trade-offs. Whenever we change something, we need to anticipate, implications in other KPIs. For example, if we consolidate the stocking locations, then the safety stock will go down, but the lead time to the customer will go up, and the transportation cost might go up. Then the increase in production frequency, meaning that we produce more often, smaller batches, then will reduce the cycle stock. But then the required capacity will go up. Actually, we will reduce the safety stock as well, but we will need more capacity, exactly because if we decrease the batch size, we increase the number of changeovers that we need in our machine. If we reduce lead time, then we might have transportation cost increases or raw material cost increases, because one way to reduce the lead time is to source from suppliers that are located close to our operations, or we use air freight, for example, and so on. There are levers, and maybe something that I didn't mention, these levers really hold. It's not wishful thinking, because inventory management is science. It has some art components, let's say, but most of it is science. That means that there are laws of physics that are applied in order to come up with a particular inventory policy. So we can perfectly prescribe what will happen as long as we manage to parameterize the system correctly. So another aspect, of course, is that there is no one size fits all. We need to differentiate our policies based on what the customer wants, but also what is the cost actually to meet the customer requirements. And here you can see different ways of responding to customer demand that have impact actually to our inventory strategy. And here, I will spend very briefly I will go through 2-3 slides to describe how we address this course, what is the approach to this course in Zaragoza. So obviously, you realize that the actual business environment has a huge impact on the right, inventory policies. So always, we have connections to real business problems. But actually, in order to come up with some formulas, let's say, with some particular insights, we need somehow to simplify the real world. This is what we call abstract. We abstract from the real world in order to come up with some quantitative models that we can manage. Manage means that we can solve. Otherwise, if we try to capture everything that exists in the real world, we will not come up with something that is solvable by us. So the abstraction is necessary. And of course, because in these quantitative models we are using parameters, we discuss of how these parameters can be retrieved from the real business, let's say, data lake. This is what we call the data analytics. Once we have the quantitative models in place and we motivate under which conditions one model is suitable for a particular operating environment, then what we do is we spend a little time to analyze and solve the model. This is the math part that we are using. Quite often the students complain a little bit in the beginning. At the end, they appreciate very much, because without the math, you cannot really understand how the inventory models behave and react to the different parameters. So we spend time in this as well in the beginning of the course, but then, we return again, shift our focus again to real business problems. And this is why we are using case studies, discussion, let's say, of problems that are retrieved from real companies. We have a lot of discussion in order to connect the dots and be able to apply what we've learned in theory to apply it in practice. And these are the topics covered. We have the economic order quantity model, which is what determines how much is our cycle stock and take into consideration the economies of scale. We have the news vendor model in order to motivate the too much, too little dilemma when it comes to inventory management. We have the order up to model and RQ model. Those are periodic and continuous review models in order to see, what happens when the planning horizon is long. We discussed the risk pooling, which is a network type of decision. We covered demand forecasting, sales and operations planning, and segmentation. And how do we cover these topics? Through models, case studies. We have simulation games. We get examples and articles for practice. We share freely our insights and knowledge that we have from our professional background. And also, of course, we have some homework. Sometimes in the beginning they are tougher. At the end, they are more fun and more closer to reality. And we have company visits as well. If we are lucky, we have companies visiting us, bringing some chocolates. Sometimes, we visit companies and we can have a beer for free. But also we play a lot of games. Here we have the beer game, and here we have the logos game. But also we play online type of simulation games to make everything a little bit more fun and more hands-on. And with this in mind, I thank you very much for attending this masterclass, and I'm open to questions. Eventually, if you join the program, you will be able to have better ideas of how to sell inventory than the one that is shown in this comic. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you so much, Professor, and thank you so much for sharing these masterclass with us. We received a few questions, which we're going through in a minute. But firstly, I wanted to leave the floor to Marta Romero. She's also connected. She's the Director of International Masters, and she will give us an overview and some practical information in case you are interested in joining the program.
Okay, thank you so much, Federica. Welcome again, everyone. And thank you, Spyridon, for providing the students with a glimpse of what you teach in the fall term to our residential students. It is like a fundamental course, and I hope that you found it interesting. I see that there were a lot of questions from you guys. I see that some of the people who are connected are already confirmed students for next year, so this is what you're going to be seeing in the fall term. And now we're going to give you more information about the program itself and how to apply, and see whether you're interested in joining us next year. So you have the Spyridon, but you will also have some of the professors for top-notch. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So hope you guys can see it. Okay.
Yes, perfect.
So we're going to briefly talk about the programs that we have on offer of the International Masters program. So the first one is the residential program. This program is our STAR program here at the center. We've been teaching this program for 18 years now, and it's full-time. It's 10 months. It starts the third week of August and finishes the end of May. Then we have the blended program. It's a mix of online courses and classes in Zaragoza, so that will be 5 months. And we also have dual degrees with other institutions for the option with MBA and the CELO program. We're also very, very proud of how our programs are ranked. So we're #1 master program MIT scale in supply chain. So that's with our colleagues from the Global State Network, MIT CTL SCM program, our colleagues in Luxembourg and also in Malaysia. Then we've been ranked #4 for the supply chain management world, so you can also see. And those of you who join us from here from Spain, so El Mundo, that's a newspaper here in Spain, we've been ranked #1 for 11 consecutive years. The CELO program, so as I was just mentioning, it's 10 months. It's very diverse. Diversity for us is key. So we do have international faculty members such as Spyridon, so he's from Greece, but we also have professors from Turkey, from Cuba, from Iran, from Brazil, so from all over the place, and who also come and teach from different business schools and from very well-known universities. It's 10 months, it's fully taught in English, and it includes the stay of 3 weeks at MIT. And it's a very small class size. I mean, we are not like one big MBA program. So for us, the possibility so that the students have access to our professors and to the staff members is very important. So we know very well each one of you. The professors know you very well. They help you not only with the courses, but also with the thesis projects. And as I mentioned, so diversity is super key for us. This could be a little bit in a nutshell, 10 months of the program. So we will start with the orientation week, and we will have some team building activities and career workshops, as well as some preparatory sessions for those who are a bit rusty about finance and mathematics. Then we will have the focus during the fall term, which is systems and methods. That's where Spyridon comes in. So he teaches in the fall. And these are like the core courses that are going to be the background for you to get the fundamentals of supply chain that you can not only apply in your future professional career, but also that you're going to be applying in your thesis project. Then we move to MIT in January for the 3 weeks, and here the focus is leadership and management. There's a number of activities that are planned by our colleagues at MIT. The big thing is that you're going to be together with the other students from all the different scale centers. And there is leadership seminars, there is masterclasses and talks by senior executives in supply chain, as well as professors from MIT, simulation games, there are some site visits. And let's say that the most important event when we're there is the research expo. That's when you guys will have the opportunity to present your findings of your thesis project. Of course, we're talking that you're going to start working on your project in October, and this happens in January. So these are going to be initial results, but you're going to be exposed to some executives that are going to attend the event. So hopefully next year it's going to be live again. We were lucky this year to go to MIT, but the event was online. So hopefully for you guys next year, it will be back to pre-pandemic times. And now let's say that this is what we call specialization. There are still some courses which are common to everyone and which are core courses, but it's also when we have the opportunity to have our students choose between the electives that are being offered. So then again, Spyridon was the professor of one of the electives on procurement, a very popular elective as well, and some of the other courses. I mean, advanced topics that you see at the bottom is where we feature professors like Joshi Sheffield, so the director of the Center for Transportation and Logistics. These are key dates for admissions this year. So as you can see, we're now on rolling admissions, and if you're an international student who needs a visa to come to Spain then you can submit all your application materials by June 15th. And if you are European, just to be here any minute, then let's say it's July 30th. Both deadlines can be extended. And what we've been doing this past 2 years is that while the program is going to take place face-to-face, if people are having issues getting their visa, at the beginning we go on a hybrid format. So don't worry if you do not have all the documentation ready by June 15th. We will try to help you in the process and we'll provide you with the information that you may need from the embassy. And if you cannot come to the program during the 3rd week of August, but beginning of September, that's also fine. This is the blended program. So the blended program is a bit younger than the residential. So I said it 18 years of the residential program. This is a program that has been offered for 5 years. And as I mentioned before, so one of our admitted students for next year is connected and he knows very well this program. So this would be that you guys take 5 online courses and then you get the MicroMaster accreditation and then you can apply to our blended program. So the idea is that you guys start at MIT with this 3-week period, and then you are in Spain, in Zaragoza with us for the following 4 months. And it's also important to say that students from both programs are taking all the courses together during the spring term. This would be, again, so the program. So as you can see, the completion of the 5 online courses. So just bear in mind that completing these 5 online courses and taking the comprehensive exam can take up to 18 months before you can apply for the blended program. So I think that's something important that you need to know. B term and C term are common, as I just mentioned. And these are set dates. So these are set dates by MIT because it goes with the calendar so that once there is a comprehensive exam, there is a one. So those of you that have already completed the MicroMaster, you still have a chance to apply for the next academic year. The deadline here is June 20th. These are some of the companies that we've been working with in the past. As I mentioned, so besides all the courses that you're going to be taking, we have students work on a thesis project. So this is not that you guys come up with a topic that you would like to research on. No, we work with companies, and these are real-life supply chain problems that the companies are facing. So we put in place this program back in 2008, and as you can see, so we have different companies in all the different sectors. It's true that we do have a very good relationship with our pharma and chemical companies, but as you can see, we have consumer goods. We also have consulting firms, you name it. So we do have a very good projects. The way it works for you guys is that during the summer we contact the companies and they come up with some projects. So as I mentioned, real life challenges that they have. And then once the program has started, we are going to have these companies come and present these projects to the student. What they will do is they can decide if they want to interview students based on their resumes. So for that, we will have put together what we call the resume book. They may decide, okay, yes, I'm interested in talking to whomever is interested in our project. Or they can say, I mean, some of the companies with whom we've been working for many years, it's like, okay, I know that you have very talented students in the program, so assign 2 students to me. And besides that, so you're going to get the support, the unconditional support of one of our faculty members. So Spyridon again is going to be the thesis advisor for some of the projects. The idea is that you start working on the project from October. That's when the kickoff meeting will take place. And so we actually had our students submit their final projects just the day before yesterday. Career opportunities, of course, depending on what you want to do after the program. We have then alumni all over the world, and then again in all the different sectors. And if you're interested in applying, these are the application requirements and the application form. You're going to find on GradApply, which is the common platform for all the MIT programs. So then you need to submit your application form with a statement on why do you want to enroll in this program. We will also need your resume. The official GMAT SEOX, so that would be the first of the online courses that I mentioned, or GRE scores. And we can give you a waiver if you can show proof of excellent quantitative skills. Then if you're not a native, we also need to have an official English test like TOEFL, IELTS, or similar. We will also request from you your transcripts and diploma, 2 letters of recommendation, as well as a video statement. The video statement, I mean, sometimes we do get people who come and visit, who are lucky that they live in the area, or they live in Spain, or even sometimes we have visits from Europe. So that also is important for us to get to see you and to understand what you want to do. So this video statement, you can record it at your own pace and whenever you feel like it's appropriate for you to record it. But we're looking to validate your soft skills. So this is also something that we see sometimes, is that people tend to read what's on the screen, and that is very flat for us. So try to be you, actually. And then, of course, this is also important for those of you that are intending on applying for the residential program, because if you're intending to apply for the blended program, I'm afraid that there is no financial aid available. So if you're intending to apply, we also have a very good financial aid program that includes also a loan, but all these scholarships that you have. So anyone that is admitted can apply for the supporting promising professionals scholarship. If you're Spanish, you can apply for multiple scholarships that can vary from 25% to 80% as the Master SE competition. And other regions also have a special scholarship, like we have one which is specific for European candidates, one in collaboration with FUNED for Mexican candidates. We do have one for women, which usually covers 50%. And if you are in a dual degree program, that can also cover 25% or 50%. And I think I spoke very fast. These are our details in case you have any questions, and we will be happy to be receiving your applications for this academic year, so that you get to experience not just 40 minutes of a masterclass from speakers, but from all the other top-notch professors.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Marta, for the presentation, and the professor ready to dive deep into the questions. So we had a couple of questions regarding the masterclasses. So Sarah is asking us, since you mentioned the environment of inventory, can you give us an example of an environmental impact on the inventory?
So if we can clarify a little bit the question, when we're talking about environmental impact, we're talking about, for example, the impact of our inventory policies on CO2 performance. That is very hot topic now for the companies. This is what we mean.
I would say so. I mean, however, maybe if Saber is connected and want to specify even more, feel free to drop a message.
Yeah, so when we're talking about, I refer to environment, I mean operating environment, and not the environment per se. But definitely lately, exactly because the companies have inventory targets as well, then these inventory targets somehow need to be considered in addition to the cost. Because until recently, the companies were making operational decisions based on some cost optimization, but now we see, let's say, it's not very common, but we see gradually inventory targets to enter to this optimization exercise. So in addition, when they need to support a recommendation for a particular network type of decisions, they need somehow to report what are the implications on CO2 performance. So eventually, these inventory models that we see, they need to be supplemented somehow to consider the trade-off on the environment as well. We're talking about the natural environment and not operating environment. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Another question. So Keninde is asking us, most of the time there is a conflict between the sales team and the supply chain team on which forecast to be used. So which one do you think should be used? The sales forecast from the sales project or the demand forecast, and why?
If these two are not the same, then we already have a problem. In organizations, we need to work with one forecast. And this forecast, at the end of the day, do we need to meet, to discuss, to agree? But if we don't agree, we will have different plans. So that means that the sales team will work with their numbers, the supply chain team with their own numbers, and at the end of the day, there would be not only conflict, but a suboptimal situation. So along of many of the new tools that are introduced in the market, like the Kinaxis, for example, planning system, or OMP and O9, I mean, those are new planning tools that are trying to use a more digital approach to sales and operations planning. So these tools, they don't allow space, let's say, for a function to work with their own numbers. Everything goes through the system, and at the end of the day, they need to come with in a consensus that this is the numbers that we are going to work with. So ideally, we need to have one set of numbers. If we cannot achieve that, then I don't know, maybe we need to start measuring the forecast accuracy and select the one that is more accurate. Because on top of what I've said, we know that the salespeople usually are more optimistic, and they apply wishful thinking. When you ask how much you're going to sell, nobody will give you a number that is lower than a target, let's say. So eventually, we have issues over there. Again, these are bias type of issues.
Perfect. We have a question for Marta. So they're asking us, so I've earned my MicroMasters 3 years ago. Can I still apply to the blended program?
Definitely, no problem at all.
Perfect. So that's great. Mohit, regarding the masterclass, is asking us if there is any difference in the process of supply planning and demand planning.
So usually, according to the theory, let's say those should be separate processes, although I'm not a fan of this separation, to tell you the truth. But the rationale behind is that, you need to have a demand plan that will use, let's say, some statistical forecast and the inputs from the sales team. And this should lead, let's say, to the unconstrained demand. So then once we have the unconstrained demand, then this needs to be communicated to the operations team, a supply chain team, in order to come up with a final, let's say, plan that will consider limitations over there, because we have limited supply, and which means that we might not be able to meet the unconstrained demand plan. So this is the rationale behind why they want to keep those things separated in order to avoid biases, two-directional biases. But in my view, let's say in theory, they are different things. We should not somehow mix those two concepts, but we need to be aware of both. Meaning as supply chain professionals, we need to be very well aware of how the demand planning works and supply chain and supply planning works. And in supply planning, there are different levels. One is I plan for my inventories in my network, and then based on these inventory requirements, I have production plans that are, let's say, more tactical, and then I have the more operational, which is not, it's a very detailed plan, telling you which batch needs to follow what, like it's the sequencing problem. And the tools that we are used for these different levels of planning are different as well. The one is more like a optimization, like a linear optimization. In the other, we are using inventory theory. In the demand planning, you are using forecasting techniques. We are talking about different sets of tools.
Perfect, thank you so much. Andrea is asking us, so basically he's asking if in the master, students are going to see the relation between sales, cash flow, and inventory.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we do. This is why probably this is the only program where we have the finance course, the finance for supply chain management, being a core course and being taught through several sessions. So at the end of the day, the supply chain professionals, our philosophy in the center is that the supply chain professionals should be accountants, meaning that they need to understand very, very well what is the impact of operational decision on the three financial statements, the balance sheet, income statement, and cash flow, and actually being able to articulate and communicate their operational ideas in financial terms. This is necessary for them to grow professionally, because the managers, as you go higher, they speak only the language of finance, but also to make wiser decisions. A decision would be wise if, first of all, has a positive impact when it comes into these financial statements, and we are in a position, to exactly anticipate, quantify, anticipate, and communicate what this impact is going to be.
Perfect. Jack has a question, so maybe Marta can help us answer this. So he's asking, what are the exact course different in terms of content between the full attending course at Zaragoza and the blended course MicroMaster plus couple months attendance?
It's actually not 2 months, it's 5 months. So that would be the duration of the blended program. So the 3-week at MIT and the 4 months here in Zaragoza. So basically you would have taken like some of the same courses that we teach during the fall. The only difference is that during our fall term, so it's 13, 14 weeks, so the courses are more in depth. So that's being covered in the residential program, but some of the courses that you're taking in the MicroMasters are going to be already what other people are going to see in the residential program. So let's say that some of these courses overlap, but then the remainder of the program, these are going to be new courses. I mentioned the electives, that is also a supply chain strategy course that uses the case methodology. We have supply chain network design. We also have system dynamics. So all these courses that are going to be complementary to what students see in the fall in the residential program, the students who completed the blended program, so during those 18 months.
Thank you. Questions regarding if IE tools are used in the inventory management, and if the professor could give us some examples.
AI, we're talking about artificial intelligence, yes? This is now a very big topic, because what we teach is the theory of inventory that follows a particular approach, a particular structure. So we assume that we can forecast some demand. There is some inaccuracy over there, but we do our best. Let's say that we have a forecast accuracy of 75%, 80%. Then we assume that the system is designed to operate as we have selected to in the first place. So we have a system, we have production sites, these production sites get raw material, they produce goods, we ship these goods and so on. So we assume that there is, a particular relationship between the different stages of inventory, let's call it like that. And then with this in mind, we assume that for the demand, there is a particular distribution, and we formulate a problem that we are solving analytically, and we can perfectly specify what is the impact of a change of parameter A would be on the inventory performance and so on. Everything is visible, everything is tangible, and actually this approach helps highlight, helps emerge, the levers that the managers have to control inventory. Now there is a new school of thought saying that we have this artificial intelligence that will take over everything. Artificial intelligence does not use inventory models. Actually, they don't even know an artificial intelligence model. They don't even know what is going on behind. What happens is you bring a lot of data into the system, you select something as the output, you have some performance indicators, and then you have some inputs, some aspects that might have a role, in the inventory. Let's assume that the decision is the inventory, how much inventory to build in a specific point in time, and then you have some KPIs to measure the performance of the inventory selection. Then you feed the system with different data sources, and the system will operate like a black box, but now it's a real black box. It's not a black box where if we, let's say, invite the consultant and ask him or her, how did you configure the inventory models? Do you consider continuous or periodic review or this or that? They can answer to us and we can change this approach. Now we are talking about a pure black box, because it's artificial intelligence, it's machine learning, and at some point there is no connection between the output and the inputs. You cannot identify and trace this connection. So far, there are only experiments of this artificial intelligence, and some professors, they claim that they operate well, but they operate well in environments that are not so structured, well structured, that actually they are closer into the retailing. When it comes into the complexity of manufacturing, with long lead times and so on, artificial intelligence, in my view, cannot do much. As one professor, and I quote him, is called François, is a guy from Netherlands, very prestigious professor, says, real-time visibility in long chains, meaning long manufacturing systems that are global and they have long times, let's call it lead times, it's too late. The real time, it's too late because you have already made your decision 6 months ago. So these artificial intelligence solutions are better, let's say, suited for environments where you get real-time signals from the demand and you place just orders upstream. If you are located upstream the supply chain, meaning that you are a manufacturer somewhere there, then in my view, we are still early to have high hopes of finding silver bullets in artificial intelligence.
Perfect, thank you.
Different schools of thoughts, though. Yeah.
Amazing. So we're actually coming towards the end of the presentation. We had another question for the admissions. Maybe Marta could help us. So they're asking, how does the dual admission work if there is a different process than the other program? I think thank you.
Yes, you're right. I was just talking to myself. It depends on the dual program that you're going to choose, because we have 5 different online, dual degree programs. So if you're interested with the dual degree with Instituto de Empresa, with INCAE Business School in Costa Rica, European Business School in Germany, or French in Taiwan, then there is different admission processes and deadlines. What we usually do with our partner is that once you start applying for one of the programs, if you give us permission, we can share your application materials so that you don't have to upload all the documentation again. But just bear in mind that the admissions processes are separate, so you may be admitted to our program, but not to the MBA program, or vice versa. So the different timelines are going to depend on the duration of the programs and whether they have 1 or 2 intakes. So I suggest that if you're interested in any of these options, that you visit our website, and please feel free to send me an email if you have any questions, or if you'd like me to put you in touch with our counterparts in any of these business schools.
Perfect. So actually, one thing I wanted to mention, since some of you were asking, the presentation is recorded, and we will be sharing with the recording of the presentation over the next few days, so you will be able to watch it again and also take some notes, as we actually receive lots of different questions, and we might not have actually the time to go through all of them. But before saying bye and closing our session, I wanted to thank our speakers for their presentation and for their time, and all of you for being connected. And I actually wanted to ask the professors or Marta if there was anything else that you wanted to add.
Okay, so from my part, of course, now that you have seen what you're going to be seeing in class, if you're passionate about supply chain and you want to learn more and advance in your professional career in supply chain, this is definitely the program that you need to take. As mentioned, if you enroll in the residential program, you will have the pleasure to having Spyridon as a professor together with our other professors, and you will still have the possibility of working together with Spyridon in the spring term if you're in the residential program or the blended program. It's an opportunity not to be missed. I can also put you in touch with our current students or alumni who can provide you with first-hand information about the program. And I'll be happy to be welcoming some of your applications in the next few days.
It can be a very good career choice, I would say, to select this field. In the past, I remember I attended a lecture, and one of my colleagues asked a question to a sales guy at MIT, a very prestigious professor at MIT. And he raised his hand and he said, I have a question. What about the cost of that? And then he was interrupted by the professor. And the professor said, if you are working in the cost center, you better move fast to the profit center. And he didn't answer the question. He didn't listen at all. Now is the time, though, that we take our events. The ones that work for the cost center, they take their events, because now it's even more difficult from people from prestigious MBAs to find a job than our supply chain students, because you see they get a job, let's say, well in advance of the graduation, and you see how much demand there is for supply chain professionals. Now with this global competition, with a lot of competition coming from low-cost countries and so on, the only way to be profitable is to manage the cost better. And we work in the cost center. It might not appear so sexy, but gradually it gets a lot of recognition and attention in the real world, in operations, in the companies.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor, for give us a hint of what it's like to study at Zaragoza Logistics Center. Thank you, Marta, for your presentation and for clearing some doubts. We're going to send you an email over the next few days with some details and contact details in case you have questions. And actually, we're looking forward to seeing you soon at the next live webinar. And if you already put an application through, I hope you get to see the Professor and Marta in person. Thank you so much and have a great rest of the day. Thanks for your time. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Federica.
Bye.